What are my thoughts on The Secret of the Golden Flower? Well, despite being translated by Richard Wilhelm with a commentary by Young, I was underwhelmed by this Taoist book, and I'll recommend two others at the end of the video that I got more out of. And so I expected a lot out of this book. Richard Wilhelm is a great translator of the I Ching who brought it to the West. Young, of course, is as a giant, and he said that he learned more from Wilhelm than he did anyone else, which I thought was a sweet thing. But this just didn't have that much that felt applicable to my practice. There was a lot of cosmology, which can be interesting, but other books had more interesting cosmology. And I know some people would not be into this book because it's quite new. This is only first printed in the 18th century, though it's said to be from 17th century wooden tablets. And then, of course, the lore is that this was written by a Taoist immortal, Liu Yan, in the 8th century, and that he got his lore from the famous Keeper of the Pass, Kuan Yin Hsi, who was said to have received the Tao Te Ching from Lao Tzu before he disappeared into the wilderness. And so dates don't matter if the material is good, but it is quite new, and the material just wasn't that moving. Also, it's very syncretic. There's similar phraseology to Christian texts, and so there's potential source in Persian mysticism, and maybe Nestorian Christianity even, via the Uyghurs, and some guy named Adam who got to the Uyghurs in like the 700s and started spreading Christianity there. But, I don't mind the syncretism. It's just, of a book of this size, I would expect to have more notes that I would share with you, stuff that I thought was interesting that I would put on my walls and stuff like that. And there just wasn't that much. It didn't really seem like there was stuff that was practical to my life or that was going to add to my own worldview. So, I wouldn't recommend The Secret of the Golden Flower. I would highly recommend Louis Yiming's Cultivating the Tao, Taoism, and Internal Alchemy. And so this is also pretty new. I think this is only 17th or 18th century is when he was writing. But in my I Ching edition done by Mimford, he's constantly referring to Magister Louis, this guy. So I'm like, why is he so into this guy? Why is he one of the greatest sources of the I Ching to this scholar? And I read this book, and it is so beautiful, and it's so practical, and it does have this high level, out there cosmology, but also its physical practices, its mental practices. And so this book was really, really helpful, and this I would recommend. And it's translated by the great Fabrizio Pregadio, who's doing so much to bring Chinese mysticism to the world. And the other one that's more fun, I've talked about before, The Seven Taoist Masters, a folk novel of China. So in the 1500s, this was a big thing being done in China, was to tell these more stories of the Taoist masters. And so you get their stories as well as the practicalities of how they lived. And I thought this was wonderful.